Welcome back, everyone, to our career development episode. So throughout the career development and interview process, we also have multiple phases that will underpin your entire recruitment scheme. So as I know, one of the first steps in the hiring process is typically a phone interview. So after we have successfully customized our CV and resume to get our crack at the door, it's time that we also start contemplating and getting ourselves prepared for tackling the incoming phone interview. She will be the lucky star who stands out and gets through the next step. So Langdon, could you brief us on phone interview in the context of a recruitment scheme inside out?
Sure. So look, when a recruiter posts a job ad, they might typically get between 50 or 100, maybe 200 applications. And their job, of course, is to try to get that down to a very limited small number of applications, which they will forward to the company to have a review of to decide who they want to interview. So their job is, first of all, to work out which documents they're going to shortlist in a number of steps. So a lot of the applications are rejected by software because they didn't have enough of the keywords. And so that helps reduce the number down. And they might get down to, they'll have a look at the remaining documents, and a lot will get rejected very quickly because they have a lot of errors in them. They show that the person doesn't have good attention to detail. They might have spelling mistakes. They don't have, again, enough of the relevant information that the person's looking for, the recruiters, the skills that they're seeking. So they might end up with, let's say, 15 or 20 resumes and cover letters, which they think are potentials. So that's where this phone call comes in. They are going to talk to that range of people, maybe it's 10, 15, 20 people, to try to get that group down to maybe about 5 or 10 applications, which they will then forward to the company to look at. That's their job, is to get that large range down to just to the top candidates. So the phone call is used to really try to weed out the people who maybe don't present as well, who don't have the good communication skills, or who are expecting a salary which isn't going to work for the company. There's a whole lot of other factors which come in, which means they can eliminate some of those candidates and get down to that 5 to 10 that they're really looking for.
Yeah, that sounds quite crucial from a resource management and time management viewpoint for the recruiter. So as part of the, as you quoted, weeding process, could you maybe walk us through a number of the commonly expected interview questions and how we should sort of tailor our communication style, as it certainly differs in terms of formality from a face-to-face interview or even an online video interview? How do we then convey effectively who we are?
So look, as you said, your presentation of yourself, how you answer the phone and how you use your voice is absolutely critical here. It's one of the big things that the recruiter is going to pick up on, whether you sound like someone who's really engaged and interesting to talk with and has a good sense of energy and enthusiasm for the role. So that's really the most important thing that you can add right away. That can be right from the very second you answer the phone. If your phone rings and it's a number that you don't know, the way that you answer the phone, I've actually called a lot of my clients just unexpectedly, and I hear this, hello, or something like that. Now, straight away, that's an awful impression to make on a recruiter, right? It doesn't say much about confidence or energy levels or who you are. Then they have to ask, excuse me, is this Langdon, or whatever it is. So right from the way you answer the phone should be something like, hello, Langdon speaking, with a good sense of energy, introducing your name so they don't have to check who it is. So the very first impression is positive, keeping that sense of energy going as you answer the questions. It can be difficult because sometimes you may be in an environment where there are distractions, or you may be traveling somewhere. That can be very difficult to handle. As much as possible, of course, you want to be able to take that call right away, because there's a risk if you just say, oh, look, I'm not available now. They may not phone back because they may get to the other people. So as much as possible, do try to have the conversation right away, but remove yourself from any distractions. remove yourself from background noise so that you can really focus on the conversation. The other very critical thing right at the start is to get their name. Right? So when they introduce themselves and say, look, hi, this is Jeff from Hayes Recruiting. I'm calling because you applied for the civil engineer role. You've got to make sure, okay, it's Jeff, and it's Hayes, because what you want to do in the conversation is use Jeff's name as often as you can when you're answering the questions, at the end of the conversation when you say goodbye, because that's how you establish that personal connection. That means he's going to feel like a better relationship with you. He's more likely to put you forward to the company as someone who they might interview.
Yeah, so on that point, what if I chance to be at a location with poor reception of internet or phone, but that call just comes over? And when I pick up and I realize that it is the hiring manager, and my heart skips a bit, but I can't really latch onto anything and grab their name. What do I do? Do I just hang up, or can I do something else to position myself better?
Yeah, absolutely. You please don't just hang up, because that's going to seem very odd, and they may just think, oh, I'll give up on them. That was just too hard. If you're in that awful, very unfortunate situation where you have poor reception, you're just going to have to try to do your best to communicate with them that your reception right there is poor. Can they please phone you back in half an hour or in 10 minutes? And then you do everything you can to get yourself ready for that phone call in that time. Alternatively, ask them, look, could I take your number and phone you back in half an hour? But what you want to do with that situation, it's awful. We know how awful it is to struggle through a call where you can't really understand the other person. They're struggling to understand you. It just gets very frustrating. You don't want that experience to happen with the recruiter. So just try to postpone it to a time when you can have a clear communication with them via the phone call.
Right. And would you repeat the same advice to those who cannot properly proceed with the phone interview in a case where they're so overwhelmed by the emotions and nervousness? Could they use this trick to sort of differ this conversation and just take a breather?
Right. So if someone, like you said, like before, your heart skips a beat and you suddenly feel like panicking and out of breath, that's an awful thing to feel, right? Because in some ways, this is your dream come true. You're getting a phone call from a recruiter, oh my goodness, and you start to feel that pressure. The best thing to do to deal with that is actually in your preparation. So before you start applying for jobs, before you get to that stage where you're submitting your documents, you really want to practice those phone calls and be ready for them. So when they do come, because this is what you've been hoping for, a phone call, when it finally does happen, you're ready because you've practiced it. And I would suggest you're practicing it with family, you're practicing that phone call with friends, get them to phone you up, get them to go through the process as closely as you can to that situation, so that when it does happen, you have some feeling that this is a familiar thing. I've done this before. You can say to yourself, I've answered these questions before. I've done this. I know I can do it. So I would say that's the best advice. You don't know that the recruiter is going to call you back. If you say, oh, sorry, it's not a good time now because you're having a panic attack, you're hoping you'll prepare yourself, they may not phone back. And that may have been your one chance this month to progress through to a next stage. So put the time into your preparation, do lots and lots of practice in the mirror, with friends, with family, whatever you can to make that situation comfortable and familiar to you so you can make the most of it when the phone call comes.
Yes, certainly. And as you said, nobody is probably naturally wired to be competent in certain activities, including phone interview. This is not an exemption, and probably the best approach would just be practicing and working towards perfecting our approach and communication styles. Another scenario where we accidentally miss the call when we're attending to work or be on a public transport. So what if we just miss that call? Is it the end of the world, and are we just at risk of passing the opportunity?
Well, that's going to depend on a range of factors, including how urgently the recruiter is looking to talk to someone and send applications through to their client, the company. how many good applications they have. If you're one of their top 5 candidates, they'll make sure they're going to talk to you because they want to present the good people through to their client again. So there are a range of things in there. If you've missed that call and they've left a message, well, congratulations, that's fantastic. That means a few things. That means your application was good enough that they really want to talk with you. That means you had your phone recorded message on your voicemail was professional enough, and hopefully you have got a good professional sounding voicemail recording, that they felt it was worth to leave a message. Because if you have something that sounds very unprofessional, they may be turned off again. So check your voicemail message again. Make sure you say your name and this sounds very clear and professional. Sorry, I've missed your call. Please leave your details and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Nice and short and professional, just like that. That encourages the recruiter to want to leave a message. So if they've left a message, that's not the end of the world. That obviously means they want to talk with you, and hopefully you can phone them back and have that conversation then when you are ready for it. So I would say it's not the end of the world. If they've left a message, you are still in the game.
Yeah, that's awesome and invaluable advice. And as you mentioned, the leaving of the message by the recruiter as showing a good sign, I was just about to circle to the voicemail, which you later on actually elaborated on. So maybe just reinforcing that we do need to craft out a very professionally sounding voicemail so that we don't let them weed us out when they listen to that. Yeah.
That's right. You've got to present as professional and confident at all times, especially in that first contact.
Would it be also a good option to follow up with email and explaining the context where you really couldn't pick this up?
No, look, it would depend on the message they've left. Normally, they want to talk with you. That's what the phone call is all about. They've seen your documents. They don't want to necessarily read another email. I would just, if they've left a message suggesting that you can phone them back, or they've said, I'll call you back tomorrow or something, I would just be getting on the phone as soon as I can. When you're in a good, quiet situation, you can focus on the phone call and trying to make contact with them. If you need to, leave a message. Again, a professional, clear message. Hi, Jeff. This is Langdon calling. I'm sorry I missed your call earlier. I'm really keen to talk with you about the civil engineering job that you advertised. I'll be available for the rest of the day if you want to phone me back. Thanks. Something like that.
Awesome.
Just very short. Don't leave the message too long. I would also encourage you, we're talking before about creating that good impression with energy, to, as I was doing then, to smile when you're leaving the message and when you're having that phone conversation, because that changes the tone of your voice as well. It makes you sound like someone who's very friendly and good to talk with. Whereas as soon as I stop smiling, you can hear there's a difference in my voice, a difference in my energy levels. And that's just less attractive for the recruiter. They want to hear someone who's got a good sense of energy. That's someone who they're happy to forward to the company for the consideration for the role.
Yeah, that's certainly a pivotal insight that we take on board. And maybe we can move to the actual common questions. And acknowledging the different contexts, is there a way we should approach the personal introduction differently compared to your face-to-face interview? In which I remember you in the other episode mentioned about the 19-second window that we should adhere to as much as we can. Does it differ in this context?
Yes, it does, absolutely. So on a phone call, when they don't have the sense of visual engagement to keep them interested, we want to keep that opening pitch shorter. So we would say no longer than 60 seconds. So that's something you need to draft down. You need to write out for yourself. Make sure you've got all those 4 sections we talked about in the earlier podcast: the thank you, the introductory statement, a brief summary of your background, and then a little bit about currently I'm doing this, and I'm really keen to get into this role, etc. So all within 60 seconds. That can seem like almost impossible when you first do it, but believe me, we've helped many clients get that down. It is possible. You'd much rather keep that short, less than 60 seconds even if possible, so that the recruiter doesn't start to turn off and get disengaged.
Yeah, What I personally decipher as a potentially relatively comparative disadvantage would be that in this scenario, the recruiter may likely have the resume visualized and displayed in front of them, whilst we as candidates approach could be anywhere, where we may not readily have the access to the device printed out resume for us to reinforce what we are, and also anything about the company that may also reoccur as a question in the phone interview. Am I right? When it comes to the question bit.
Yes, especially if you're applying for multiple roles every week and you have each one's a little bit different and the requirements are a bit different, and you suddenly get a phone call and maybe it was a role you applied for last week and you're scrambling to remember, oh, what role was that? What role was that? Because of course in your opening pitch we talked about how you want to emphasize the matching skills you have, but then if you can't remember the role and exactly what it was they are looking for, you are in a vulnerable situation. You can't make the best of that situation. Personally, if I was in that situation, I would have a little notebook in my pocket and I would just have a little page for each role that I've applied for over the last week or two. I might just have the company name, maybe the recruiter's name, and a few details about the job, when you applied for it, and the key skills. So if you suddenly receive that phone call and you work out who it's from, you can be reaching into your pocket, pulling that out. Maybe you have a pen there as well because you want to write the recruiter's name down. Maybe it's someone you don't know. Get any details about the phone call, about the role, about the process. And you can have a quick look and remind yourself what that role is about. So that's what I would do. I'd also make it easier for yourself. When you're applying for jobs, it's much more important to have good quality over quantity. So it's much better to be really doing good customized applications for, say, 2 or 3 roles a week where you have a good match, and really working on those documents to make sure you're addressing each of the key skills, than just to have a resume that you send off to 15 different job applications each week and hope that something is going to work out for you. That way you're also more likely to remember the details of that job when you get a phone call about it, because you've spent time on it. You've spent a lot of time looking at the job ad, working on the documents as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really valuable advice. It certainly helped that we become a good listener so that we latch on to that person and immediately just grasp the context in which we're dealing with the situation, so that we understand who it is for, who the position is, and most importantly, who we are talking about, the person's name. Sometimes if
Yes.
it's focused on ourselves or our nervousness, we may just slip this part, let this part slip inevitably.
Yep, that's very natural. And I've even myself, sometimes I've come off a phone call and I've suddenly realized I didn't remember that or catch the person's name, and it was actually important that I did. So that's just a habit you have to train yourself in to become very aware of. Always try to get their name, make that personal connection.
Yeah, and that does help us grow, I guess, more immersive into the conversation to make them feel more intimate, to quickly build a rapport just using your voice. Yeah, so do we need to do anything after that phone interview? If at the end of the interview there's a sign that we may anticipate an interview invitation, what if that invitation hasn't come through within the time frame discussed?
Yes, definitely you want to do the follow-ups. This is a really important and underestimated part of the job searching process. The follow-ups after you have lodged your application documents, and also a follow-up after any phone call, is absolutely critical. That's how you let the recruiter or the hiring manager know that you are really keen for this role. Right? So you can imagine if you saw a job and you felt this was a perfect role for you, it met all your requirements for a job, you had all the skills, the company was nearby, the salary was going to be good, had a good career pathway, everything about it was perfect, you would certainly do a lot of follow-up and make every effort to make sure the company knew that you were the perfect candidate for that role. That's essentially the attitude and the approach you need to take with every job you apply for. So that's why these follow-ups are so important. If you talk with a recruiter and they say, I'm going to forward your application to the company. I should let you know by the end of the week. And along comes Friday and you haven't heard from them, definitely phone them up, find out what's going on, because that's how you just keep on showing them that you are someone who's really keen and who's going to work hard in the role, because you're working hard at the application process too.
Yeah. Without further ado, I might just invite you to, building on that point, share a bit of tips on the timing so that we strike a balance between appearing keen but also avoid appearing too desperate or pushy. Understanding the recruiters are very hectic, busy people with a really packed timetable, and you're definitely not going to be their priority, like the top priority. We have to think about them as well, not just ourselves.
Yeah, so that is a very fine line to walk. As a general rule, when you first made contact with the documents and you're going to phone them up or contact them through LinkedIn, say the next day, or just to make sure that they going to have a good look at your document. So that's the first step. With the phone call and following up on the phone call, as you said, sometimes I'll give you a time frame. So obviously, if you contact them within that time frame, if they said, I'll get back to you by Friday, and you contact them on Wednesday or Thursday, that's plainly just annoying because they've already clearly given you a time frame. It's when that time frame ticks over, that's when it becomes legitimate to talk to them again. If you leave a message for them that day because you don't get through to them, then I would wait. Right? So at that point, you've already had one conversation with them. You've allowed some time to pass. You've left another phone message. And if there's no response to that, then I would wait a few days and then maybe just send a little LinkedIn message to say, hi, I'm just following up to see how that role is progressing. You can easily become annoying, and you don't want to become that annoying candidate because they will just put your application aside and won't want to talk to you again for future roles. Remember, recruiters can be very helpful for your career. A number of our clients have made really good relationships with recruiters who then actively come back to our clients and say, oh, look, I've just found a new role for you that I think you'll be perfect for. I'm going to put you forward to that. Because our client has been able to establish a good relationship with them, a good rapport, and the recruiter's actively trying to help that person into roles. So if you can avoid being the annoying person, but show that you are friendly and considerate of the recruiter and just but still professional and enthusiastic, that's a good way to go about building that relationship.
Yeah, certainly playing the long-term game as it boils down to. I understand. Yeah, so thank you, Langdon, for your insights in these episodes. I will look forward to the other episodes with you. Thanks.
No problems at all.